Welcome to the third webinar in a series offered by the ASB Young Professionals Committee. We are pleased you could join us. My name is Rosa Regalado and I am part of the ASB Young Professionals Committee. Before we begin today, I would like to remind everyone that the American Society of Baking offers a free first-year membership for wholesale bakery employees, discounted membership rates for young professionals, and complimentary memberships to full-time students. The benefits of membership are priceless when trying to jumpstart your career. If you are not currently a member, please check out the Society's website at www.asbe.org to join. Our webinar today, titled Introduction to the Market Research Process, will be presented by Luann Williams. Luann is Head of Research at Innova Market Insights. She started her career in the Netherlands 23 years ago and brings a unique global perspective on the global food industry. She is an active technology scout and frequent speaker at industry events. Luann leads a team of analysts on the Innova database who are constantly looking for the next big trends. We will have time at the end of this presentation for any questions you might have. You can submit your questions directly through the webinar screen during today's presentation. I will now turn it over to Luann.
Thanks, Rosa. So today I'm going to go through some slides just looking at what's happening in the bakery industry. There's lots of interesting development, and I'm really going to focus on just a few things. But before I get started, I thought I would just let everybody know where the information for today's webinar comes from. We have a big database that covers trends, new products, market sizing, and consumers, and it's laid out across a big digital platform. So all of the charts and graphs and things that you see today come from this big database. So I decided to just focus on a few topics today to really look and see some of the key things or some of the things that I think are more interesting and are really driving innovation, or where we see innovation a lot more. So I'm going to start with breakfast, and I'm going to wrap up today by looking at our top 10 trends and looking at how those trends are impacting on the bakery category. So we'll start with breakfast. Breakfast is an interesting topic. We've done a lot of analysis on breakfast lately, and if we look at breakfast from the perspective of bakery, so in this case we searched for the number looked for bakery products launched from 2009 to 2013, and then we looked at how many of those mentioned breakfast. And we saw a really big increase starting in 2011, and we've seen it go up by 82% over this time, with somehow breakfast mentioned in those bakery launches. So breakfast is a big occasion where there's still a lot of opportunity for bakery products, and I think this is one of the products that really illustrates extremely well how looking at something in a different way can create a huge opportunity. I think everybody knows about Belvita, and it's been very successful in lots of different countries in the world. So the first time I ever saw these was probably more than 10 years ago in France, and they always had a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and they were meant to be dunked into the hot drink for breakfast. But I just pulled out a few examples. You can see UK, US, New Zealand. So this has been a global success. The fiber is also a key part of this. So if you think about how important whole grain has been for bakery, these products really do encompass a lot of things that are very on trend. So it's whole grain, it's fruit, it's fiber. It's also relating all of that to sustained energy. So I think this is a great illustration of how you take a product that really is more like a cookie and then, you know, add a breakfast component, and you create a whole new opportunity and a new occasion for bakery products. And then, of course, once you have a lot of success, you see a lot of other companies working in the same space. So there's a lot of competition for this segment. Belvita dominates, but you see a couple of examples here. McVitie's in the UK, very much related with oats, and looking at that relationship between oats and oatmeal, and also oatmeal cookies, so to create something that's new and a bit different. And then Weetabix, which is one of the iconic cereal brands, and now having a Weetabix on-the-go product, and again, still with that fruit and fiber focus. And then the one on the right, this is not the same type of product. It's more like a Pop-Tart. But this has been launched in Italy, and you can see it also has a whole grain claim. It has a fruit claim. So again, I think where Pop-Tarts have become maybe a bit more indulgent, this is a way to kind of bring that back into something that is, represents a better start to the day. So again, just a repositioning of the product, and again, opens up a new opportunity. So there's probably a lot of products that you could start to just look at in a different way, and how can you, create some kind of new opportunity for bakery. Looking at home baking, I mean, you just have to watch TV to see the huge interest, in Cake Boss, and there's been TV shows about cupcakes. And I know even in my own house, my kids are wild about that, and we've already gone to Cake Boss in Hoboken to make a visit. So again, just looking at what's happening with home baking everywhere, I think that's indicative of just this big trend, and there are a lot of things driving this trend. But consumers want to make really interesting, sophisticated products at home, and now there are a lot of products that help them to do that. So here's some examples of pizza dough, for example. So you can see Simply Roll and Create. There's one that's infused with rosemary, so it's not just plain pizza dough, it has something special. The triple chocolate cookie dough, Yorkshire pudding, again, that's a very regional type of product, but still, again, something that's difficult to make yourself. And then the bottom right, the volcano cakes, something that's difficult to make, really nice to eat in a restaurant, but now you enable consumers that they can make it at home in an easier way. So again, lots and lots of different things. I think there's still huge opportunity in home baking, and a lot of things have happened, but there's even more that can happen in this space. And I think children are a great opportunity in this segment as well, because they love to bake, and they're also hugely inspired by what they're seeing on TV. And again, if we look at what's happening in terms of, this is looking at new product launches, and this is looking at bakery launches versus bakery ingredients and mixes, so all those kits would fall into this. And you can see that the home baking ingredients and mixes are outperforming bakery overall. So this is, again, 2010 is the index, and you can see that there's been a significant growth over this time, but especially for the bakery ingredient subcategory. I think, and then also just rethinking what's happening in bakery. Texture is interesting as well. So there's a lot of products that promote texture, and I think bakery has always done it. But again, I think there's also some more opportunities in this space. So we see here Super Moist, which has been a brand that we've known for a while, but still, this is a great way to illustrate how important texture is, because it's all on the front of the pack and it's with the name. So deliciously moist, extra fluffy, chewy fudge brownies. So I think there's a lot of things. You can look at inclusions, adding nuts. Almonds make things very crunchy, for example, but there's lots of different types of inclusions, but also a lot you can do to just even play around with the texture of products. So bakery gives you a lot of opportunities with fillings and layers, that there's a lot more that can be done in this space as well. And then I think also looking at global trends. So these are two fun examples. Everybody knows muffins, and most people know scones or biscuits. But you can see the muffins, they're big ones, launched in Turkey. And the scone mix was actually launched at Trader Joe's in the U.S. So again, what we've also seen with bakery is that there's been a huge, almost rush around the globe. We've started to see red velvet flavor appear in Europe. I was in Chile, I was in Spain over the past couple of years. I've found little tiny cupcake shops. So almost everywhere you go, there's some kind of bakery trend that has gone around the world. Cheesecake is another one. And now I think if you think about brownies and muffins, you can go anywhere in Europe and find brownies and muffins on any restaurant menu in every kind of bakery. So bakery trends are very global. So there are probably a lot of things that there's still a lot more room for looking for that special product that's being sold somewhere else in the world that some region or some country really likes, and chances are that somebody would like it somewhere else. Churros are another great example. My daughter told me she had a churro in our town recently. So even something that's been, a Mexican favorite for a long time, we now see also appearing in Europe. And then gluten-free. I don't think you can talk about bakery without talking about gluten-free. We've been waiting for a long time for this to peter out, but this seems to be a trend that's here to stay. I don't even know if we can call it a trend anymore, but there are a lot of gluten-free products. So again, I think one of the most interesting examples on this slide It's the one on the right-hand side where you now see it's very expensive packaging, but the shake and mix, pancake mix, also gluten-free. So again, there must be a market. There must be margins high enough that this just continues for a lot of people. But if you have the problem, it's great to have something that's convenient like this. So certainly seeing a company like General Mills move into gluten-free with Bisquick, such a big brand, it really does tell you that this is something that's really big and something that's also here to stay. Now we're going to look at bite-sized treats. So we've seen, small things, small little pieces of things and bites and chunks and clusters for a long time. But I think it's interesting to see just how much this continues to evolve. So bite-sized cookies are certainly on trend now. And I think I have to mention Loacker, the wafer cookie that's on the left. There's not a place in the world that I don't go. I can go to a small, niche type of store in northern New Jersey, and I can see Loacker, and I can go to Vietnam, and I'll find Loacker. They are absolutely everywhere in the world, which to me speaks to not only the great distribution system that Loacker has obviously developed, but number two, to the universal appeal of wafers. So wafers are quite simple, but again, if you look at how many products are also based on wafer, if you look at Ferrero confectionery products, a lot of them are really wafer-based and, with different fillings and coatings and maybe dipped in chocolate. But again, it's a bakery product that forms the basis of something that really is a confectionery. So again, that speaks to look for ideas and things that you can adapt and create something new. And then I think the other two products are more, one, the Mrs. Fields in the middle, something that's a bit more indulgent, bite-sized fudge dip cookies. Again, this speaks to this continuing trend with looking at portion control and still being able to have that little permissibly indulgent treat. So this will stay very much on trend. And I have some examples later on. I think it's even the next slide. Yeah, brownies. So we've seen bite-sized brownies for a few years, but now we're seeing them kind of re-emerge. And again, the other thing that strikes me about the examples here is that they go from every end of the spectrum, something that's more artisanal, like the one in the middle, the Artisan Fresh Mini Brownie Bites, which it has more kind of bakery appeal, the one on the left as well. But then even something like Little Bites, which has been around for a long time, but again, here to stay, that there is certainly a market for that little indulgent treat. And brownies are a great way to do it because they are so rich. And I think also when you have something that's bite-sized, you can play a lot more with flavors and fillings and really dark chocolate. And it's something that no one would ever be able to eat and not eat too much of because it would be too overwhelming. But you can play around a lot more with even more extreme indulgent flavors in little bite-sized products like this. So I think, again, there's some new ways to think about this as well, that you could look for new opportunities in this space. Individually wrapped, again, same type of theme there, but again, doing something that indulgent little small treat that somebody can keep in their bag and really look forward to because it's really indulgent. I think these are also great because everybody always has a cup of coffee on their desk now or in their hand. So again, there's, I think, a lot of opportunity to make that little sweet thing that goes along with it that's portable. The other thing I thought was interesting about these examples on the Little Bites, there's a lot going on there in terms of claims that they had yogurt, so that's something that's been very on trend. Seasonal favorite, again, this whole idea that we eat with the seasons and not out of the seasons. But again, 2 health cues appearing on the front of that packet as well, and as well as 20 muffins, 5 pouches. It's individual, it's convenient, so a lot of messaging on that package. The other thing I thought was interesting is if you look at the little nutrition panel on the front, both of these have around 200 calories, so that seems to be the point. So it's not 100 calories because it wouldn't be big enough. But again, that 200 calories gives you a nice little opportunity for an indulgent occasion. And again, continuing on with that theme about front of pack calorie claims. So Weight Watchers is all about calories and watching what you do. But now there's a couple. These are just a couple of examples. We could have found many more. But I intentionally picked one from Mexico, one from Japan, also to just illustrate the global nature of this, that it's not just an American thing. But again, really clear message on the muffin there, 78 calories. I think that's great because I think a lot of people now, when you think about the 650 calorie muffin, that's really hard for some people to justify eating. But this really does makes it okay. It's got apples in it, 78 calories. It's very clear, very simple messaging. And the one from Japan, a bit more indulgent, but again, you can see the really clear 157 calories on the front of the package. It makes you feel a lot better about eating it if you're watching what you eat. And you can still have bakery. It's not that you can't have it, but you can just have something that's a bit more calorie controlled. Portion control is also linked. I'm going to talk to this later. This is our #1 trend from this year, is looking at waste. And so I thought this is an interesting way to just illustrate how portion control goes hand in hand with this whole goal of reducing the amount of food that we throw away. So maybe there's a little bit more packaging, but again, if you reduce what you throw away, you certainly do have something to market around this waste trend. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we're going to move on now to healthier breads. I just have a couple of slides about this. My examples here are all, I think, 2 from Argentina, 1 from Italy. So again, just speaking to the global nature of looking at things that are healthier. And these are also have a lot of messaging on them. So you can see omega-6, omega-3, 6, 9, seeds, talking about fiber, low sodium content. So I know that the whole, well, you can really go back more than 10 years with the whole Atkins diet and the whole low carb, the beginning of the low carb movement. And we're still kind of in that because a lot of people focus on carbs when they talk about weight loss. But I think we have to look at carbs in a different way, and carbs need to be communicated in a different way. I think there's a lot of new grains, which have made it really interesting, so you can make maybe new blends of flour or include a lot of seeds, or focus on products that are high in fiber, for example, and just somehow find a new way to present carbs. And I think these are 3 great examples of what you can do to communicate around a healthier type of bread product. And again, I mentioned the mixed messaging about carbs, and I think the product on the left is interesting, that it's just a thinner bread. And I noticed now if you go to restaurants, a lot of restaurants serve flat bread instead of rolls now. So again, we do acknowledge that there certainly is a change in thinking around carbs, which has persisted. But again, there are ways to address that. And here's 2 nice examples of things you can do to talk about, to address the carb content. So this is a lot of numbers, so let me just talk you through this. So I wanted to look here at the penetration of different health claims in the different bakery subcategories. So what this really tells you is if you look at the U.S., and again, this is looking at what's claimed on package. So there could be a lot of products that maybe they're not claiming it. And I think certainly if you look at Europe and if you look at whole grain, it says only 5.42%. And that's not that only 5.42% of launches are whole grain. A lot of people still buy from the bakery and they only eat whole grain bread, but it's not positioned or marketed as whole grain bread. But I think in terms of positioning, you can see that Americans are a lot more receptive and open to that health messaging on the product. So this does speak to that. So again, no additives and preservatives is the top claim across all regions. And just look at Australia, New Zealand. That's a great place to look for inspiration because it's a market that is very health-driven, very health-conscious consumers. And so we see a lot of messaging appear there early and a lot of really interesting innovation in those markets as well. And if you look at just all the different claims, look at allergy positioning, gluten-free positioning, quite high also in terms of whole grain compared to some of the others. So a great source of inspiration. And the other one, I think gluten-free kind of stands out, that almost 13% of new bakery launches in the U.S. have some kind of gluten-free claim on them. So again, that just speaks to the that trend and how long it has persisted and will probably continue. So again, the U.S. shows a higher penetration for health claims on bakery products than some of the other regions. The other one I should just mention really quick is Latin America has a really huge positioning there for no trans fat, and that has a lot to, that's driven by legislation that you have to label. So it's not that they are doing something so different there. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about fiber. So again, we've seen a lot of emphasis over the past 5 or 6 years looking at higher fiber whites, adding things like inulin to white bread to give it add back some of the complex carbohydrates, I guess you could say. But again, 100% fiber as wholemeal bread. And then one on the right, looking a bit more premium, that it's sugar-free, also 100% whole wheat bread. But again, really focusing on fiber. We know that consumers are trying to look for more fiber. Just look at the growth in the bar industry, also focus on fiber. But again, there's an opportunity for bread in that space as well. Because some people don't eat cereal, they don't eat bars, and they don't have a lot of other sources of fiber in their diet. So that's an opportunity, I think, for bread to talk about the energy that it gives you, but that it also is a source of fiber. And gluten-free, again, we have to mention that we're seeing, just like the other, I had a couple of other more indulgent type of products here, but you can see gluten-free has moved into also the very indulgent type of categories with very mainstream products, like Madeira cake is very popular in the UK, the toffee slices, but also the little tarts. So again, that tells you that there is a market for a wider range of products in the gluten-free space. And then in terms of stealth reformulations, so I've been talking about this for almost 2 years, and we've been doing analysis looking at this. We know that there's a lot of stealth reformulation going on, especially with sugar and salt. So it's not that easy to track unless you decide to sit down and do it. But there's certainly a lot being done with sodium, especially in bread. So what this chart shows you is looking at the U.S. bread category and looking at sodium content per 100 grams, and you can see that there's been a significant reduction in the amount of sodium in bread. So if you look in 2008, most products had about 5 milligrams, a half milligram of sodium per 100 grams, and now we have seen that's dropped by 2013 by about 20%. So about 70% of breads had less than 444 milligrams of sodium per 100 grams by 2013. So again, this is almost always done by stealth. There are very few breads that are making any kind of sodium claim. But this shows you really clearly that it's happening. Okay, now we're moving to the fun part of our presentation, looking at hybrid products. I think this is interesting as well, that, and again, one of our top 10 trends is look out for the small guy. And I think in terms of creating excitement, the cronut was certainly a product that created excitement. I mean, you couldn't help it if you turned on Good Morning America or any of the morning shows. They were talking about the cronut and showing the lines of people coming out of the bakery. So when people, I don't know, I've had some people tell me, well, we're worried about, grains and worried about people eating bakery products. You can absolutely create a lot of excitement by doing something unique and different. So we see this as a big trend, that we're seeing a lot of hybrid type of products in other categories as well, but I think these are some of the most fun ones. The cronut has been protected, of course, but now we're starting to see other manufacturers come out with similar types of products. So here you see the croissant donut and the doucement, and again, fluffy goodness. I love the picture there. It couldn't be more clear to anyone. But again, this is new and it's different. So you can, I think when you look at this, you could think, gee, I'd like to try that. So that speaks also to the appeal of something that's really new and different. These as well, the Krispy Kreme donuts with key lime pie, but it only becomes an even more indulgent dessert and a substitute for a cheesecake, they're claiming. The product on the right is a picture from the Philippines. So again, these are also being, again, speaking to the global nature of some of these products as well. So that's a nice hybrid example. I have a few more. So here's another one, the Starbucks Duffin, which you probably heard about as well. So the cross between the donut and the muffin. And then a few others. So again, you can just look at these, but you can see there's almost endless opportunities to do something that's new and that's eye-catching. Could even be done as a limited edition around the holidays. But again, I think this is certainly an easy way to breathe some excitement and some fun into the category. So we're almost to the end. I wanted to just look at our top 10 trends and look at how are those, what are the implications in the bakery industry from all of these trends. So I mentioned waste not, want not already, but we think this is going to have a very big impact on the food industry. I think also if you think about, one of the things that it's easy to throw away is fresh vegetables, but also bread. So again, what can you do to somehow have some kind of impact on waste with these categories. So I think that, again, that can be packaging, it can be smaller sizes, it can be promoting a half a loaf of bread instead of a full loaf of bread, for example. So or even frozen bread, there's a lot of opportunities there. Number two, the trust issue has been a big one. So I think this drives a lot of trends that consumers are kind of looking, back to basics. They're finding more pleasure in cooking at home and in simpler food, being with friends and family. So looking for those types of family occasions. All of these are all driven by trust. I think also the economic downturn over the past 6 years has also had a big impact of people returning to comfort foods. So again, that really does speak very well to what's happening in the bakery industry. Look out for the small guy. I mentioned that. I think sometimes you have a chef or somebody that really does something that's new and really different that inspires a whole category. I think Cake Boss is a great example of that. They now, ship products across the U.S., not that it's a major operation, but it certainly does say something about the appeal, about knowing who's making your cookies or your cake and where it's made. So again, there can be a lot of craft inspiration or handmade products that can be inspiring for the category. Number 5, health is more holistic. So I think for a while we focused on functional foods and fortified foods, and I think now what we see is, a tomato sandwich made on a really nice bread that's high in fiber. It makes me feel good about what I'm eating. It's also good for my health. Okay, the mayonnaise is maybe a little bit indulgent, but I think also the way consumers are starting to look at and think about health, that also includes things like how it's, is it sustainable? Is it, environmentally friendly? Is it fair trade? So I think in terms of looking at how you address health in the category, it can be a lot more holistic than just looking at something that's really specific about a nutrient. New superfoods, I think alternative grains is one of the big opportunities here. There's a lot of interest in the ancient grains, so bakery is certainly a great category for some of those, for these new superfoods. The hybrid, I think I illustrated that pretty well, looking at new textures and flavors that can certainly excite a lot of consumers and become a real central selling point of the product. And then stealth sodium reduction we know is well underway. I mean, trans fats was another one that the fat was addressed quite successfully in bakery, so there's a lot more that can be done around that. And then alternatives. We've seen a lot of dairy alternatives, but also every section I did in this report had something about gluten-free today. So again, that's also an alternative. So I think some of the newer grains or some of the ancient grains, maybe the older grains, can also be an alternative. In this case, it can bring something new to the bakery category. So that's my presentation for today. So now I'll just put it back over to Rosa.
Thanks, Luann. We have a couple of questions. So it's what is the process to determine a new bakery trend?
So every year we track products globally in more than 70 countries, and we have a team of analysts that just every day they're analyzing data. So they're looking at all the launches, and they're looking at what's happening, and they're going to trade shows, and they're reading trade magazines, they're talking to people, they're working with our customers. So just through that, when we start to see things appearing, we might see it the first time and say, gee, that's interesting, and then we see it 2 or 3 times, and then we go to an exhibition and we see somebody's booth completely focusing on that, and then maybe we see, maybe it starts with small companies and goes to slightly larger companies, and then when you see a big company do it, that tells you that this is a trend that's here to stay. So it's not just something that just pops up, it's something that we watch over time, and it becomes really evident really quickly when you can analyze 30,000 bakery products and you see things emerging out of those products. That's when you know it's going to become a trend.
Thank you. What is particular to the U.S. bakery market that is different from other markets around the world?
Well, the funny thing that I think about the U.S. market, so I am American, you can hear it from my voice, but I've lived in Europe for more than 20 years, and I think what we've seen is there's a big shift. I think America is becoming more European. If you think about something like you always brought your bread at the grocery store, and it would usually last for a week or something. And now you're seeing the emergence of bakeries like Panera, where, the bread's not wrapped, and you walk in, you kind of make a big fuss over what you choose. So I think the U.S. market has evolved, and then I think the European market has evolved, where it was, almost all artisan or from the small bakery, and it's become more packaged over time. So they're kind of meeting in the middle. So that's the one notable thing that I would make. I think also the bakery markets have become a bit more industrial. I think it's really difficult for, the corner bakery to bake everything from scratch and be successful at it and still make money at it. So I think now what you're seeing is there's a lot more consistency in products because they are made more industrially. So they're more consistent. And then I think you can do a lot more with it. And maybe the inspiration piece does come from, the small bakery in New York that comes up with the cronut. But I think in general we're seeing kind of a meeting of the middle, that more artisan-inspired or more artisan-type products in the U.S. And I think in Europe we're kind of seeing a lot more packaged things. So it's a meeting in the middle.
We have a question. What are the biggest problems bakers face?
Can you say that again? The biggest problem with what?
What are the biggest problems bakers face?
The biggest problems with bakers. Well, it's a huge category, but I think in terms of problems with like health is the number one thing I talk about. So I think sometimes looking at how do you deal with the challenges of that part of the market, and how do you make your products healthier, because it is something that's very indulgent. So I think that's a problem. I think consistency is a problem maybe, and clean label. How do you keep your products very clean label is another challenge. And if you want to go for consistency, sometimes it's a bit difficult without using ingredients that are maybe not quite as label friendly as they could be. I have to give Housegard a plug here. I know that I've seen some very clean label solutions in terms of emulsifiers and things that are maybe not completely mainstream, but there are definitely possibilities there that I think clear up some of the problems that bakers face. And then I think the other challenge of the bakery, let's call it this, a challenge of the bakery industry, but I think it addressed it during the presentation today, is this whole what do I do with the whole anti-carb, feelings, and what do I do about that? But again, I think there's a lot of solutions around that as well, just looking for different ways to create products that, maybe have seeds or different types of grains and has a different type of nutrition profile. Or, that is smaller, different format or something like that. So I think, to me, those are the biggest challenges without, going into detail about your formulation, those kinds of things specifically.
So how can young professionals access and benefit from market research?
Well, I think market research it's a crucial part of any innovation process. I think you have to start with, number one, knowing what's out there, because there's nothing that hasn't been tried somewhere, somehow. So I think you should always, and there can be some completely new things, but it would be totally unlikely to find something 100% unique and different. But I think you have to start with, it's part of your education process. So I think when you're younger, you don't quite have as much experience, but you can certainly close that knowledge gap by being really smart with market research and learning about the market and learning about the market around the world. And it's quite easy now compared to what it was 20 years ago when I started out, because now there's so many online tools and different ways to do market research. So I think in terms of speeding up or closing the knowledge gap maybe with more experienced colleagues, I think that market research is really, really important. And also to understand the consumer, to find out what are their sore spots and what are they looking for. So I think for young people, they have a big opportunity because they typically are a bit more maybe tech savvy than some of their more experienced colleagues. But take advantage of it and build your knowledge that way.
Another, do consumers like healthy, indulgent products, or do they prefer all healthy, all indulgent?
Oh, I think it's a combination of everything. I think certainly one of the buzzwords is permissively indulgent. But I think it's all about the occasion. There are occasions where you want to be completely indulgent, like Christmas. I mean, could you imagine eating a low-fat red velvet cake? You know, what would be the point? So I think on that occasion, you want to be completely indulgent. But maybe on Tuesday when you're going to get your coffee and you're looking at, you know, the big muffin and the pound cake, but then there's that lighter muffin that says it has 30% less fat and, you know, 20% less calories. Well, that's the time that I'm going to be indulgent, but a little bit healthier as well. And probably on Monday morning, I'm going to, you know, maybe I really ate a bunch of junk over the weekend, and so Monday I'm going to start my day out and I'm going to eat, you know, brown bread and cream cheese for breakfast in the morning. So that's my healthy occasion. So I don't think there's any, you know, there's no simple answer to that. I think later in the week, later in the day is your more indulgent type of opportunity, and early in the week and early in the day is your healthier type of occasion, and then it blurs and all the times in between.
How has non-GMO, organic, natural affect how consumers buy products? Will this trend fade?
I think natural is here to stay for sure, or clean label. I don't know that. I think companies are becoming afraid to say natural because there's no definition of natural. But I think certainly cleaner label, cleaner ingredient list, that is absolutely here to stay. Organic, I'm not so sure. I mean, the thing I think about organic, and every time I hear people talking about how far it's going to grow, if you just look at the fundamental economics of it, it can only get so big before you run out of land, and by the time you get so big, the price crashes, and then you can't do it anymore. So I wouldn't be quite as bullish on organic because it just fundamental economics tells you it cannot get so big. Almost 10 years ago, I remember Walmart talking about all the organic things they were going to do, which never happened because everybody can't eat organic. The prices wouldn't be high enough to sustain the farming. So it will have its place, but it will never be huge. Non-GMO is an interesting one as well. I think, I don't know, I think even if you read the New York Times editorial page and looking at their contributors, they'll even say there is absolutely no evidence that GMO is dangerous. And I think the New York Times is very much a proponent of clean eating and simple eating, but even when they are starting to say there's just no issue, I think there's a big knowledge gap on GMO, and there will have to be pushback because there just simply will not be enough ingredients to go non-GMO for everything. Look, even if you go to Chipotle and all the claims that they make, and sometimes there's a little sign that says, like, oops, we're almost there, but not there yet. In terms of supply chain, it's just really, really complex. So I know that short term, you can probably make a bit of buzz and get some attention, but I think give it another 2 or 3 years, and I just don't think consumers are going to care about non-GMO. I really don't think so. So I would be very careful about that because if you start to make all these promises and then one day you can't source raw materials or ingredients, then you have a big problem if you created a brand around it. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I think it's a short-term thing, and I think it will die out, and nobody will care after a while, except for the people who will always care. But they're going to be eating organic, and they're going to be buying direct from farmers, for most of their products. I just don't think it's going to be a big issue. I think it will die out.
Are there any new technology solutions that can change the baking industry?
There are. I think there's some new cooking technologies which are starting to evolve, which could change the baking industry. I think there are probably some new ingredient solutions that could change the bakery industry. I think it's so enormous that it's difficult to change it rapidly, but I think that there could be some companies that adopt some of these new technologies that do start to change things, certainly on a small scale, and that it will probably scale up over time. But I think, cooking technologies are something that's certainly interesting to look at, and look at oven technologies.
Are there any other major differences between Europe and the US? I guess in terms of bakery products.
Yeah, well, I think from when you go to work and things to think about, Europeans tend to like to buy bread every day or every other day, so freshness is really, really important. They don't want preservatives in their bread. It should be very clean label, very basic. So that's a huge difference. In the U.S., we typically, a loaf of bread will last for a week if it's, kept in your kitchen. So that's a fundamental difference. And I think even if you get packaged breads in Europe, there aren't very many branded ones. They're almost always, and they're usually bake-off in the store. So that's a big difference. And also bake-off bread, the par-baked bread, is huge in Europe. And I don't understand why it hasn't really taken off in the U.S. because there are a few things as nice as walking in your house and smelling bread that's baking. So I think that's a big opportunity, is look at their breads that have 30-day shelf life. They're par-baked. You come home, they're sold in a vacuum pack. Put it into or it's a modified atmosphere packaging. Put it into your oven, and you get the wonderful smell of baked bread, and it's warm to eat. So I think that's a big difference. I think for the rest, I think we've seen a huge increase or decrease in the time for, more, we'll say, the indulgent like types of cakes and cheesecake and those kind of things. You find them everywhere in Europe now. If you eat at any restaurant, they'll usually have a cheesecake or maybe a layered cake or a chocolate cake. So I think in terms of indulgent desserts, there's not as big a difference as there used to be. And I think in bakery, the ones that I mentioned are the ones that stand out for me.
Thank you, Luan. I don't think there are any other questions. So, well, we have one. Will a recording of these web seminars be available for future viewing? Yes, the recording will be available to the ASB website within the next few days. So we would like to thank you for your participation on this web seminar, and stay tuned for future young professional activities. You will be able to see today's web seminar at the ASB.org pretty soon.